r/AskReddit by routinereddit. What's a place that seems fine during the day but gets really creepy at night? Service station/rest stops. Fine in the day, but I've been in a few 24-hour ones way out in the middle of nowhere at night, where I'm literally the only car in the lot, and all the low lights are on and the staff is a skeleton crew mostly in the back doing stock. I remember standing in one huge rest stop once, and it was just me and this creepy arcade music playing. It felt like I was the only person left alive after some apocalypse. Well, of course it's creepy when the crew is a bunch of skeletons. Not to mention spooky. I work midnights at my local hospital and end up in the OR rooms a lot. I help prep for the next day's surgeries. Totally creepy. I also work midnights at a hospital, and while I don't find the OR creepy, the back hallways on the way there are ultra creepy. I worked in a very large hospital doing bulk inventory. All of the buildings and loading dock were connected via underground tunnels, which I spent most of my time in. If I were there really late, I'd have a 15-minute walk in these tunnels without seeing or hearing anyone else. I worked at Johns Hopkins for a bit. I had never been to a hospital with underground tunnels before that. It was creepy AF. Agreed. I broke my hand and went to a local hospital at 3 AM. All the overhead lights were flickering erratically. There were some pale looking nurses and a doctor shuffling around silently in their white coats. There was a cigarette extinguished through the paper sheet on one of the gurneys. It was all very eerie. A school. This is true. I put myself through college working as janitor in a New York City public grade school. The only time I've ever been truly scared at work is when I had to stay late for some contractors working outside the building, and I heard a basketball bouncing in the gym when that side of the school was locked down. My parents had a meeting with the principal of my elementary school when I was little. We were the only ones in the school, and I got bored. We were there for hours, so I decided to walk down the hall to see if the gym was unlocked, so I could play in there while they talked in the office. I got to the doors and saw it was open. There were no lights on except the exit signs. There was an old chalkboard on wheels set atop the stage. It was sitting vertically. I kinda felt uneasy being in the alone at night, so I slowly began walking back to the office. The second I left the gym, I heard a basketball bounce a couple times. I looked over my shoulder and saw a ball rolling from the stage and the old chalkboard was flipped horizontal. I ran so fast that night. And yet, of course, no one believes me. Now that I look back at it, it might have just been the janitor pulling my leg. Nope. School ghosts. I believe you. You can trust him. He was the janitor. Ghost ballers. My father briefly worked as a night janitor at an elementary school. He hated it. He said he'd hear a voice around a corner, run over to see who it was, and no one. No sound of running. No doors closing. Nothing. He quit the night the whispering turned into kids laughing and all the stall doors in a bathroom slammed shut at once. To give my dad credit, he stayed till the end of his shift. 0 He said he was either literally going crazy or something was messing with him, and he wasn't sure which was worse. The brain tricks us constantly. It's not used to actual silence, and he heard what at least some small part of him expected to hear in the absence of sound. Nursing home. I didn't believe in ghosts until I worked at one. I was about to say this. Old manor house converted to a very expensive residential home for the elderly. Butler's pantry, large staircase, high ceilings, and every so often a confused resident silently roaming the halls. The worst bits. Firstly, having to retrieve the cleaning stuff from the top of the very dark cellar stairs, and secondly the very large, very dark windows looking out into the pitch black grounds. Apparently all rich people wanted to see the zombie apocalypse coming from a mile away. Are the decaying still out there, Prudence? Yes, mother, but they shouldn't get here till Tuesday. A recently divorced uncle's house with an unkempt lawn and a 1992 Saturn sedan that's missing half of the rear bumper parked in front. This place is so wait, that car's a 93, never mind. But it is a Saturn, which is still pretty scary. Dirt roads. I grew up on one, and would walk it to get to the main road. To catch the bus for school, I'd have to walk it at night. To babysit my neighbor's kids, and the difference was crazy. During the day it's bright, there are flowers, and the worst you'll see is a snake or a deer. At night the roar of the frogs is deafening. The trees seem to encroach on the road, and you catch glowing eyes in the woods around you. And you get all the crazy drunk drivers at night. I've seen some stupid shit go down on the rural Michigan back roads at night. I went to school in a farming community between Lansing and Ann Arbor. In our town and the surrounding towns, drunk driving was basically a hobby for teens. A lot of kids would swear they'd never drive drunk, but cruising dirt roads drunk was a different thing and totally normal. Theme park. I work at Disney World. It's honestly really cool at night, because a lot of the areas are designed to have really cool lighting. But when they shut down all the lights and turn off the music and you're the only one in the entire land, it get really creepy. If I worked closing shift, I'd occasionally walk back to costuming from Frontier and above ground, instead of using the utilities. It's eerie seeing, and especially hearing, the park when no one is there. Calm, quiet, empty. That's when the cats come out too. Wait, so there's cats in Disneyland? This sounds super interesting. Can you tell us any more? Not op, but the House of Mouse has a rodent problem, so they let cats roam around. Hopefully Mickey works the day shift. Dude, there's a failed planned city in the Mojave Desert in California called California City. It was meant to house 70,000 residents, but only 14,000 live there. It's the size of Los Angeles, but with only 14,000 people. There are whole sections and subdivisions of the city that are completely abandoned, and the desert is starting to move back in. There are neighborhoods with houses and stop signs that are buried under sand. Holy shoot, that sounds so cool. I've visited a few totally abandoned villages before, and they were spooky enough, even though they probably consisted of, at most, maybe 7 or 8 houses, and one single road. I can't imagine entire chunks of a city being just completely empty. As a side note, being from the UK, planned cities are kind of eerie to me. They're cool, don't get me wrong, but it's so different to the kinds of cities that I'm used to, that just sprung up over hundreds of years. I can't imagine everything being so orderly, and like the downtown/city center area not having to be mostly one way, because the streets were built without cars in mind, because they wouldn't exist for another 800 years, lol. Leave a like if you are enjoying the video, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. My basement growing up creepy. There was a weird storage jar that you couldn't access unless you had a ladder or something. The door was about 3 foot wide by 1.5 feet high. The jar itself was pretty deep, like easy could fit a few people in there. I never found out what it was used for. House was built in the 1930s. Coal bin? Could be. Nah, murder locker for sure. Unlit swimming pool. Any body of water I can't see the bottom of. Fuck, going in my childhood pool at night always got me on edge. It's not that big. I'm a full adult. I can touch the floor easy, but fucking hell, do I hate focus on my breathing. A room with lots of big windows and no blinds, only small translucent curtains. Geez, I had one of these as my bedroom for a short while hanging up. Hated looking out into the garden at night. Our dining room window always scared me growing up. Hated it. Didn't help my mom hung a giant mirror in there as well. I also didn't like mirrors for a long time. Still don't really. The movie What Lies Beneath has messed me up regarding mirrors. It was the first movie I saw that used the see something in the mirror effect. Literally anywhere that isn't lit up. What about a room full of puppies? Or a quiet forest with a dead body swinging from a rope in a tree? The swinging thing gives me chills when I imagine it. And it's still swinging, meaning it's probably recent. Thanks for that. Any room my cat is in, my dog does this thing where he stares into a dark room and barks. Enough to scare the shit out of me, especially as I'm home alone quite often. You just wasted my whole obsession with having dog at home. If it helps, my dogs don't give a shit about lighting. Cars that slam their doors a mile away are a different matter. A toy store. Rows upon rows of stuffed animals, dolls and action figures, all staring at you in the dark with their dead eyes, right up until the doll you're looking at turns her head and winks at you. There's a snake in your boot. Cliché, but a cemetery. Going to mourn your loved ones during the day, going to desecrate a grave at night. Y'all don't go there for the free clothes. Nice tux, Dwight. It belonged to my grandfather. He was buried in it, so family heirloom. Abandoned buildings, churches. The church doesn't even have to be abandoned. There's something about being in a building that you're used to only being at when there are a lot of people around that's weird. I definitely heard some weird shit in the church I used to play in a band with back in the day, and heard stories from other people, like how the air is impossibly still and stagnant. Almost heavy feeling. The walls feel closer than normal. Not a single sound can be heard except for in the distant outside world. All tied in with the feeling that you are being watched. One night, around the time I was a high school senior, some friends and I explored an older movie theater that had been closed down for a couple of years. It wasn't too large. I think it had 5 or 6 screens. The thing about movie theaters is that they're designed to be dark and quiet, even when they're open in the daytime, so it really had that feeling you describe. This cinema had been gutted, but not entirely. Projectors and most furniture was gone, but we found stashes of things like old bulbs, trailer reels, ticket rolls, promo items, notebooks, etc. Walking into a theater room where all the rows of seats have been removed is really disorienting. Without the seats, curtains, house, and floor lights, it hits you how weird the geometry of the room is. The floor sloping down with nothing to guide you as a frame of reference. Walking the projectionist corridor is also creepy and adds an unsettling voyeuristic aspect. The woods. The woods can be creepy at day too. I know. One time I was out doing my usual rounds of hiding vintage porn magazines for kids to find and heard some very spooky noises from deeper in the forest. Scared the shit out of me. Thank you, uncle. Fun story. My brother-in-law fancies himself some kind of hardened badass and has 15 acres of wooded property. He dared my husband and I to walk the trail cut through the woods in the dark. We took lights because it WAA so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, but he kept stopping us. Turn off the lights. Let's see who chickens out. My husband finally gets annoyed after an hour and 55 pounds of mosquitoes, so he slowly picks up a huge stick. We walk and get shushed to turn off the lights, and husband chunks the stick in a puddle at his brother's feet. This 40-year-old man screams and sprints all the way back to his house. The hallway that lead to my parents' room when I was a kid. The hallway from my room to the only bathroom in the house, where the door creaks and swings on its own every once in a while. Horrifying. The hallway that led to my parents' room had a set of stairs halfway along it. I was always afraid to pass the stairs for fear there was something at the bottom, waiting for something to pass by. Anywhere in Milwaukee. I work late nights and the city is 1000% creepy at night. 500,000 people spread over almost 100 miles, and you're lucky to see a single sober person. If you're unlucky, you run into a Milwaukee crackhead, and boy, they're something else. It's illegal to be sober after 9 PM in Milwaukee. We call them Milwaukee's best. A 9 to 5 office. Every so often I need to stay late at work just to get something done. Once I was there about 9 PM, and I heard a door slam. I was alone on my floor. I got the fuck out of there. When I told my boss about it the next morning, she was like, I would have done the same thing. It's spooky up here at night. Probably your it guy's fucking with you. I do it when people think they are alone at the office. Or cleaning service workers. The service that cleaned the office at my last job didn't start work till 7 PM. I accidentally scared the hell out of a cleaning service worker when I came back to the office late to pick something up. He had a Bluetooth speaker going, listening to some Whitney Houston, and he was dancing his ass off to I Wanna Dance with Somebody. I Wanna Feel the Heat with Somebody. He didn't know I was there, and I let the door close loudly. He didn't expect his dance party to be interrupted. He sounds like he'd be fun to hang out with. Parks probably. I find parks at night really relaxing. Are a fellow hobo. A graveyard. I had a lot of friends growing up that would love to walk through graveyards late at night. I never joined them because I have seen enough horror movies to know what happens to the carefree teens walking through cemeteries late at night. My friends used to do this, and I was very fortunate to have never gone along with them. On one night they got mugged by a homeless guy. On another night they were busted by a cop who cited them for trespassing and possession. One of them had a bag of pot. Nothing horror movie related though. Out on my great grandparents' old farm there is a cemetery that has been forgotten for over 200 years. Middle of the woods. Closest home is about 1600 yards away, downhill through brush. You have to take this winding trail that's usually grown over to get to the cemetery. It has a black wrought iron metal fence, with the only clear entrance being where a tree had fallen once and bent the fence over. No gate. In the autumn during hunting season I go there and sit on a particular gravestone every year waiting for deer. I arrive there probably around 4 and wait for sunrise. Being in the graveyard at night is actually very calming. It's quiet and it's cold, so there are no insects. You might hear an owl or the occasional disturbed bird, but it's peaceful. Twilight hour though is fucking horrifying. Shadows start dancing around off of the headstones. The forest still isn't awake yet either, so there's still no sound in the daylight. It's still cold, and all you hear is the wind and your own breathing. The noises you do hear are even worse though. Rustling of leaves is suddenly an explosion. The snort of a buck is the most terrifying though, the way the sound bounces off of the trees. That first hour gets your adrenaline going, but after it calms down it's nothing at all. Very relaxing.